Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared, and today's video is about my favorite blade, or my top 5 favorite blade shapes. Now, I love a lot more than 5 blade shapes. I should have did a top 10, but the thing is my top 5, a lot of them are very similar to one another, and I'll show you as we move forward. So this is the Tucson TS 129. I call this the drop foot. So this is one of my favorite blade shapes. I love this blade shape. It's just super useful for utility cuts. You do have a little bit of belly for slicing. Another example of this is like, fail. It's kind of like the Artisan Arion. You see how they are very similar to one another, but yeah, it's good for utility cuts. You can get good push cuts, good slicing, just an all-around very versatile blade shape. And yeah, and I really like it. I remember the first knife I got that was very close to this blade shape was kind of like the Kershaw bare knuckle. And a lot of people would say, well, that's a sheep's foot blade shape. And it is very similar, but it is slightly different as well. And that's why I call it the drop foot. And that is one of my favorite blade shapes. We'll say that's number 5. Number 4, the leaf shape. I love the leaf shape blade shape. Not everybody does. Some people think it's very ugly. I used to be one of those people. I used to think this blade shape was so ugly till I started using it. And I realized how useful this blade shape is. You have the tip that you can actually get into things really good, and to pick at things and wedge in between something and get into something. You can use it for utility cuts, good strong push cuts, enough for belly. It's just a super versatile blade shape. When you're going to open up a box, it's easy to get around and open everything up. It's just a super versatile blade shape that I really like, and I realize how much I like it. Especially more one like this one. This one, the tip, it goes straight down, but the belly kind of goes up a little bit higher. This one, the belly doesn't quite go up as high, but yeah. That is something that's pretty common that you'll see with my top 5, is that the tips go down. Next, my next favorite, I guess this would be 5, 4, this would be 3, is, some people would call it the reverse tanto. I'm just going to call it a clip point. It's kind of like a sheep's foot as well. Here is a bunch of examples of it. We have the Benchmade 940-1. We have the Ganzo F756. Then we have the Tucson 158. Here is the Kaiser Genie. And then here's a great example of it, the Quiet Carry Waypoint. Now this is labeled as a drop point. This is a clip point, guys. You can call it whatever you want, but this is the blade shape I'm basically referencing. It's kind of a reverse tanto. I don't think it's a reverse tanto because this isn't sharp, and a tanto, the other edge is sharp. So it doesn't make sense for me to call it a reverse tanto, but this blade shape is very useful because, one, like I keep saying, you can get to the tip very easily. Another thing, you have a little bit of belly for slicing things and really getting in close for slicing. Long straight edge for push cuts. And then another thing is that depending on the size of the knife, you can get this into stuff and use the spine to pry. I kind of like that about it. Now, it does depend on the geometry and a lot of other things, but in some cases, because sometimes even more important than the blade shape is the grind. So, but like one like this, you couldn't do that. Well, maybe lightly, but this is a great example of what I'm talking about. Just such a good little blade shape. And, you have so much length of cutting edge, I guess depending, but in this case, the clip is so close to the tip that it doesn't start way back here and clip down. It clips right at the tip. So you usually wind up having, a pretty long cutting edge. I guess it depends though, because like if I pull this up, this one has a bunch of belly. And there always is going to be a lot of variables. So next we have the drop point. And this is all great examples of the drop point I love so much. All three of these. Now this one, you know, I wish the tip went down just a little bit more like the Sebenza. If you look, you'll see the Sebenza's tip goes down a little bit farther. It's bigger knife. But where the spine of the blade goes all the way down to the tip where it's easy to get to it, but you still have a little bit of belly. And, you know, just it was a blade shape designed and made to be a jack of all trades, and I really like that about it. And it's a grind that takes, or sorry, a blade shape that takes a really good hollow grind. I also like that. Now this one, it's a drop point. However, instead of the spine like on the Sebenza just going straight down, it actually has a little bit of spear point to it. So, and I really like that. One, it helps for this exact example. This one brings the spine strength a little bit closer to the tip. So while it's still really good for penetrating utility cuts, it brings just a little bit of strength to it. And this thing is super thin behind the edge, but I love this. It's almost like a mixture between a spear point and a drop point, and I love that. So yeah, I love the drop point blade shape, especially when it's kind of a modified spear point and drop point blade mixed together. Next, oh, the spear point. Am I doing 6? Well, I have 2 more, so this one and one more. I don't know. Spear point. I love a spear point. One, I like it because it's really good for penetrating things, but 2, you know, depending on the grind again, you can use the tip of it for light duty prying. You'll notice a lot of Emersons have it, and it's just a really good, very useful blade shape. Good slicing, good. The tip is directly in the center of the pivot normally. That's one way to kind of look at a spear point. There's a lot of spear points out there, and there's a lot of different versions of it. A lot of people think of a spear point as kind of like one of those double-edged daggers. When I think of a spear point, I think of this. You know, just the tip of the blade lines directly center with the pivot, but it's easy to get to for utility cuts. You have a bunch of belly for, you know, slicing, not too much belly though, because if it was too much belly, the tip would be up here, you know, way up higher, and I don't want that. I want the tip to be nice and centered or below centered. I don't like my tips to be higher than centered. You know, I like it to be like basically straight with my forearm, kind of, if that makes sense. You know, where I can drill a hole if I want to, and it's not all awkward drilling a hole. I can literally just turn the knife and drill a hole. Just a really useful blade shape. I love the spear point. This is a great example of it. Now, I think this is labeled as a drop point, but I don't care. This is basically a spear point. You can call it a drop point if you want to, but I absolutely love this blade shape. This is possibly my all-time favorite blade shape right here, because it is a drop point, I guess you could say, but kind of like a mixture between a drop point and a spear point, which is what I love. Now, last but not least, the sheep's foot. I love the sheep's foot, especially like one specifically like this. It kind of has literally everything I've shown all into one. If you look at it, if we bring up everything, it kind of has them all into one. I'm not going to bring them all forward, but like if you look at this blade shape, like look at the way the grind goes, it's very similar. If you look at the spear point, you know, I'm specifically talking about the edge right now. The edge, it's very similar the way the edge goes, but the one thing I like about it is that the tip usually goes down a little bit below the center of the pivot. I love that. I like having a lot of leverage when I'm holding my knife down into my cut. I can push hard and deep into something and yank back and get a ton of leverage, while also being able to puncture something if I need to. You know, if I need to stab a hole in a drum or something, you know, I can do that. Or if I need to puncture into something and cut downward. Same thing with this one. This one's a little bit taller and more extravagant. So I don't know if I would say this exact blade shape, but you get the idea, where the blade goes this way and then clips down, or rounds down. You know, that's why I said specifically this one, but this is still a great example. And it's really good. I mean, you got the belly for slicing, you got a good area for push cuts, but you still have that tip. Now, this one is a little taller than probably what I would say is my absolute favorite, but it's still, you get it. You understand. It's, you know, a sheep's foot blade shape. One very similar to this. I love it. Another Hinder has a great example of it. You know, when we were talking about the drop foot blade shapes, another good example of that is the Ensingo blade shape from Chris Reeves. They have one that's, you know, a lot of people would say is a sheep's foot blade shape. It's very similar to like the bare knuckle. But yeah, I love this blade shape. And really, all in all of them are my top 5. And when you talk about your top 5, it's hard to say which one's my number 1, which one's my number 1. I think I kind of already said it. You know, it's kind of a mixture in between, you know, all of these. So, but yeah, it's kind of a mixture with all of these, when if you think about it, you basically come up with this. You know, and not saying the whole, just the actual blade shape. I mean, it's just so good. I love this blade shape. It almost is kind of a little bit of a sheep's foot, a little bit of a spear point, and a little bit of a drop point. I just absolutely love that. All right, guys. I love you guys. Let me know what your guys' favorite blade shape is, or top 3. Remember, guys, you know, I could be screaming my top 10 and throwing some Tontos, some Warncliffes, some Hawkbills, all kinds of stuff, you know, because I love all those blade shapes too. But right now, I was basically just talking about my absolute favorites. I love you guys. Peace.